This session, of course, the theme is overcoming fears and really getting to the root of trauma. And so many of you shared that you actually have traumas that you are aware of, things like your son got into an accident 8 years ago and died in that accident, and that's an overt trauma that we're aware of, or rape that has happened, divorce that has taken place, and a serious diagnosis with serious illness. But then there's the buried trauma that we're not aware of, which can result in a multitude of symptoms where we can just feel like we're tired all the time. A number of people wrote that procrastinating, doing things that we absolutely know that we need to do. And so, or a malaise that we're feeling like we know there's more to life, and yet we can't somehow access it. We don't have that vitality, that energy that we previously had, or we constantly getting ill. And so to me, that's evidence that there are emotional issues stored inside. And one woman was sharing that she actually has an alternative health clinic, but she got an issue with the nerves in her spine and had to undergo spinal surgery. And then the nerve pain from that surgery was so serious that she had to go back in for a second surgery where they worked within the cage of her spine. And now she's out of pain, but she's aware that there's buried emotional trauma there. She doesn't know what it is. I mean, she knows there's some sort of anger here, but she's aware. She has a sense that there's emotional trauma stored in that spine. And so even though she's been working with it medically, she wants to get to the emotional root cause. What has put that in place and to clear it at the deepest level? And so I love reading something like that, not because I'm grateful that she's been in pain, but I'm grateful that she's become aware that there's something deeper that's operating there, that's buried there. And so many of you spoke about that, that you have a sense of that. And actually, you're a reflection of what's going on in the whole field of cellular healing and science today. And what has been found in terms of our emotions and our physical body is that when we feel a strong emotion, and science has found this, it releases a quantifiable biochemistry into our bloodstream, which will go to certain cellular locations inside the body and block the cells there, rendering those cells incapable of communicating with the rest of the cells in the body. And if over time illness happens, well, obviously happens where the cells receptors are blocked. Conversely, what's also known to be true is that when we feel ourselves, feel emotions very naturally, like a child does, where it just comes up and out, and we're very exposed and it just comes up and out, our cell receptors remain open. And so, unfortunately, what happens when we freeze, like someone was saying that they froze, there was a person in the street who freaked out and they actually froze in the face of it. Or let's say there's been an auto accident, and you've heard what happens is there's an auto accident, and what do we go into? We go into shock, where there's an immediate shutdown, a biochemical shutdown of the body. Now, when that shutdown happens, it can be someone's criticizing you and you don't know how to cope with it. And so there's a shutdown. It can happen that some overt trauma, like an auto accident, happens, that you go into shock and it releases that biochemistry and all the emotions you felt at that time, the fear, the pain, the terror, the anguish, whatever desperation, helplessness you were feeling at that time. Before you shut down, you were feeling that and you shut down. The biochemistry gets released, goes to the cells, and before that cell generation dies, it passes on its programming, its consciousness, that emotional pain to the next cell generation. So the next cell generation is born as an exact replica of the previous cell generation. So that programming gets passed on throughout our lives. As a matter of fact, many of you already know I was diagnosed with a basketball-sized tumor. And when I was in the doctor's office, she said, Brandon, this probably started as one cell when you were around 8 years old, and it replicated and became two cells. And then by the time I got to the doctor's office, it was replicating exponentially, aggressively. And, I got diagnosed with this massive mass. And so that programming had just been passed on down through the time and the ages. And so this can happen with all of us. It doesn't have to be something as serious as abuse or rape or, sexual assault or an accident or loss of a loved one. It can be something as simple as a stranger in the street freaking out and we freeze and the shutdown happens. And so, one of the things that the journey does is it gives us the ability. I call it the journey because it actually is a journey that you can undergo inside your body to get to these specific cellular locations where these old cell memories are stored, these buried emotional pain, this trauma, this hurt, this shame, this guilt, whatever it is that's stored there, and go through a deep process of releasing and letting go and understanding forgiveness so that when the new cells are born, they're born devoid of that old consciousness as new regenerative cells. Now, in my own healing journey at the age of 39 years old, I had been in the health field and in complementary medicine, certified in so many different areas. And the last thing I expected to have happen was to be diagnosed with this massive tumor. And it really sent me reeling because I was supposedly doing everything right. And so it catapulted me on this profound, life-changing, soul-searching journey where I actually found a means for all of us to go on our own journeys inside of our bodies to get access to these specific cellular locations, to uncover the trauma, the pain, the buried emotional issues, to clear it out at such a deep level and so completely, so that when new cells are born, they're born without that as new regenerative cells. And this is why I work with medical doctors and with hospitals in all over the world, where, for instance, in Israel, there's 3 hospitals there, and one specializes in heart disease. And let's say you undergo a heart operation, well, then you're going to go for a week into a recovery center where you use the journey to get to the emotional corollary. What co-created the illness? We all know, that if repeated heart attacks are happening, that there's going to be some major stress happening in that life. You don't need to be a medical doctor to know that there's emotional issues that are unaddressed. And then, it shows up as a heart attack. But the interesting thing is they found that if they're able to get to the emotional root cause of what co-created that heart attack in the first place, that they've done thousands of case studies following these people who've undergone the journey, and they're finding that those heart attacks aren't recurring. Same thing with the oncology hospital, where after they've undergone treatment, they go to the recovery center, they undergo the journey to get to the emotional corollary, the root cause of what co-created the cancer, and they're finding it's not metastasizing again. Same thing in with multiple sclerosis. That's believed in some cases to be degenerative. And yet they're finding that not only are people no longer crippled, but they're having normal lives after they're finished with undergoing the journey. So this is work that is, yes, work you can undergo, but has a scientific basis that modern medicine is using to get to that emotional corollary.